Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, recruiting in yoga pants. We are taking our next deep dive into the ATS. What is it good for anyway? That is the question, is it not? And so a couple weeks ago, we started with an overview. Here's generally how an ATS works and what we use it for. Last week, we dug into creating a new position. So honestly, y'all, with very few exceptions, nothing really happens until there's a role to recruit for. I hate to break it to you. It all starts with having a position to go and hire someone for. This week, we're going to talk about the candidate workflow. So once y'all hit submit on that application, what happens next? Does it just go into a black hole, never to be found again? Do 75% of resumes really not get read, as if they just poof, disappear from the ATS? No, none of those things are true. Here's what is true. There are over 200 ATSs on the market. There are a near infinite number of ways to configure them, and no two systems are exactly alike. That said, I'm going to walk you through a very common workflow. We've got the whiteboard, we'll draw some pictures, we'll have some fun, and hopefully this gives you a little bit more understanding of the inner workings of this piece of software and how it actually does help recruiters stay on track. Hopefully. Let's discuss. All right, so you found a role that you want to apply to, maybe more than one. You have now hit all those buttons. You have submitted your candidate record into the ATS. So here's you. You're my candidate or applicant, whatever. Not exactly interchangeable. I have a video on that as well. But you now have a candidate record in my ATS, okay? And within that, I can actually see all of the different roles that you have applied to. And I can see, so I've clicked on your name. I've searched for you by your email or your candidate ID or your name, and maybe your name is Amy Miller and there are 8 million of you on the planet. Anyway, I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna see here are the requisitions that you have applied to. Each of these requisitions, I'm going to have a quick little snapshot, and maybe I have a date. You applied on this day. I have maybe last activity, right? So I can kind of very quickly see the status. I also see, now maybe this one is my rec, and maybe these two belong to a different recruiter in my company. So I can see that too. And depending on the activity, I might want to call one of my recruiting partners and say, hey, you're talking to this candidate. They also applied to my role. Can we share? Like, my hiring manager might be interested, or there might be a great fit here. So that's one of the reasons that this particular part of the workflow is so important, because I want to be a good recruiting partner and peer. I want to make sure that I'm not stealing anyone's candidates. And having these things time-stamped is really helpful. Because if I can say, hey, they applied to my role the same day they applied to your roles. By the way, we already moved forward. It's been a week. We're already at the phone screen stage. You don't get to come in and try to outmaneuver me. We'll share. I want all of my candidates to have all of the opportunities that they're interested in, and just interview for everything. But there are generally some rules and best practices about how we engage active candidates, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the business as well as the job seeker. So this is what it looks like from the candidate page. So I see all this history. There's usually a big old chunk of documentation down here and some notes, or maybe some automated, like, this happened on this day, this happened on that day, like that kind of stuff. So depending on how the system's set up, there's a lot going on here. We're going to talk about this next week. So come back. All right, documentation right after this video. Okay, so that's what it looks like from the candidate side. What does it look like from the requisition side, and how do most recruiters kind of follow this workflow? I don't even know if it's most, y'all. Maybe it's some. Maybe it's a few. It's definitely me. Okay, so what does that look like? I'm actually going to start with, instead of starting from the candidate page, I'm starting from the requisition page. So similar to the functionality we saw on the candidate side, I'm going to see a bunch of profiles. I'm in the requisition. I see all these new applicants. I can click into each of those. It's going to take me to that candidate page. But what I will see is candidate, and I'll see probably like a status, a source maybe, right, is another one. So maybe this is name. And so I see this list. Now I can, also date would be one. Date might be, it doesn't matter where it is. These columns can sometimes be moved around as well, which is also interesting, right? Like maybe depending on how it's configured, I might want to see status first. I might want to see something else first. Doesn't matter. For me, I'm going to go in by date. I want to look at the most recent, or the oldest applicants first. I'm going to work backwards. So I'm going to hit that little, filter button or whatever, or adjustment button there. And I want to sort button. I want to sort by date received. I'm starting with the oldest first and working my way to current. That just feels like the right thing to do because I don't want to leave people hanging unnecessarily. I want to close out on their application quickly, move them to the next stage if that's appropriate. So I'm going to now start looking at all of these resumes. One thing that's kind of cool, not every system has this, but many do, where I can do a bulk edit, okay, or a bulk activity. I hit that button, it selects all of these profiles, and then I submit that search request, and it pops up individual windows where I can actually go in and eyeball each candidate very quickly and make an immediate determination. So I might see very easily, yeah, totally meets the BQs, moving forward. Okay, cool. That status now becomes reviewed, and maybe this person was a referral, and I'm now pushing them to the next stage. And it was, whatever, today's date, whatever it is. Maybe this person was not a fit. They're now dispositioned, right? Maybe they were, an internal candidate, and I worked on Thanksgiving and dispositioned them yesterday, whatever. So I can do that activity pretty quickly by selecting all of the candidates or all of the profiles and just quickly one by one sanity checking. Some of them I may not be ready to move forward yet. I might have a question. Okay, so I'm going to look at it, but I'm not going to take action yet. So it's still going to be reviewed. This person is reviewed by me. This person who I liked, I should have done this differently, is now pushed forward to the hiring manager review, right? So I can actually quickly eyeball the status here, and I can see what's going on and which actions I've decided to take based on this review. What happens, we're going to just isolate this fellow right here. So what happens once I've made that judgment call and I think this person is good, and I'm probably moving multiple people forward at the same time, right? I'm going through that list, moving the ones that I think my manager are interested in or would be interested in and want to see. And so now the workflow goes like this. So I have my candidate, they go to hiring manager review, right? So I hit that button in the ATS. It is now in the hiring manager queue. So they also can log into the ATS. They have visibility into their own requisitions and candidates who are attached to those requisitions. Hiring manager review. If no, dispo. If yes, move to, maybe it's a phone interview, right? The phone interview is then scheduled. This also happens in the ATS. This right here is going to trigger an action for me. I might get an email. I might get a notification within the ATS. I might have to go into my dashboard and look at my phone screen requests, which are all listed there. And I have to actually take action. I have to actually do something with this request. So now I've submitted this to scheduling, or there's an automatic, scheduling system that some ATSs might have, things like that. I'm basically hitting that button, or a hiring manager is hitting that button to make that request. If that phone screen is not inclined, we are dispositioning. If that phone screen was inclined, same workflow, a notification happens, a request is sent, an email is created, whatever, and now we're going to an on-site. Are you picking up a trend here? If the on-site was not successful, we didn't get an inclined vote from it, or a positive vote, I'm going to disposition the candidate, or I'm going to move them to an offer. So all of these steps are happening within the ATS. And again, much like on the candidate record, there's going to be documentation and notes and things that I'm jotting down, which we're going to get into next week. But all of these things happen within the ATS, and then that offer is created, negotiated, and so on. It's either declined, or with any luck, it's accepted. And then we go to onboarding. Okay? So all of these things are happening, and that workflow takes place in my ATS, and there are different ways that I can access it. I can go in through a candidate record and I can see their activity specifically. I can go into a requisition and I can see all of the candidate activity on that specific rec. Or, and this is where a lot of us live, I go into my personal recruiting dashboard and I see each of these steps and what action is required of me at each stage of the process. And this hiring manager review might have a bunch of different recs and a bunch of different candidates. And I have to go in there and make sure that everyone is moving forward, is documented correctly, and we're meeting whatever SLAs or time goals around getting back to people, moving people through the process, or dispositioning people appropriately. All right, y'all. I hope that helps. I tried to be quick. I don't think I was, but tried to give you enough information to understand generally how this works while still leaving lots of room for the different nuances of different systems, and also just how a recruiter chooses to use their ATS. So tune in next week. We will dig into documentation and how we know what's happening at each stage because of how the ATS is tracking not only our written feedback, but also what is automated in that regard. All right, y'all. We will see you next week.